It all started one late evening. The sky was already dark, the sun sinking behind distant hills, but my friends and I decided to push on. It was supposed to be a fun road trip, an escape from our mundane routines. Just a group of us. Me, Jeff, Emily, and Chris, heading out on a random adventure across the Midwest. We'd been driving for hours, and the familiar hum of the car's engine was lulling us into a sort of daze. We were taking the back roads, avoiding the interstate to see some of the less traveled parts of America. It was Chris' idea to avoid the crowded tourist spots. He loved the quiet. "You never know what you might find," he said with a grin. Honestly, I was feeling the thrill too. The open road and no plans. It was Jeff who noticed the strange turnoff. It was just a small sign, barely visible in the twilight, marking a detour into the woods. "What's the worst that could happen?" he said, half joking. None of us were against it. We were all looking for that next story to tell. We turned off, and immediately, it felt different. The air felt thicker. The roads were narrow, more like dirt paths than anything official. But we kept going, laughing, not thinking much about it. The further we drove, the quieter it got. No other cars. No signs of life. The trees closed in on both sides like a canopy, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer and longer as we moved. "Hey, did anyone notice how isolated this place feels?" Emily asked, her voice a little too tight. "I think we're good," Jeff said, but even he couldn't hide the unease that crept into his voice. I noticed it too, that eerie, heavy silence that settled over us like a blanket. We drove on. The only sound now was the tires crunching against gravel. But that's when it happened. Chris slammed on the brakes. We all jerked forward, the sudden motion throwing us off balance. "What the hell, man?" Jeff shouted, clearly startled. Chris' face was pale as he pointed out the windshield. I could see it too now. A figure, standing alone in the middle of the road. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. But there was something wrong with him. He was just standing there, still as stone, not moving an inch, his arms dangling by his sides. His clothes were ragged, covered in dirt, and he just stared. He didn't blink. "I'll just roll past him," Chris muttered, shifting into gear. "No," I shouted instinctively. I don't know why, but something in my gut told me we should turn around, leave now. But Chris wasn't listening. He slowly began to edge the car forward, inching closer to the figure. That's when it happened. The man moved, not like any person would. It was jerky, unnatural, like a broken puppet being dragged along. His head snapped toward us, and his eyes, wide, too wide, almost unnaturally so, locked onto ours. That's when I saw it. His mouth, stretched, far too wide, as if something inside of him was trying to tear its way out. "Go! Go!" I screamed. I could feel the panic building in my chest, the fear that twisted my insides. But Chris wasn't fast enough. The man reached out, his hand so long, his fingers impossibly thin, and scraped across the hood of the car with a noise like nails on a chalkboard. Chris floored the gas pedal. The tires screamed against the gravel as we shot past him, but not before I saw something that chilled me to the core. The man, he was smiling, a grin that wasn't human, and that smile stayed with me, even as we raced down the road, heartbeats pounding in our ears, each of us silent and wide-eyed, not daring to speak. The rest of the night would only get worse. We didn't say anything for a while, just kept driving. The silence was suffocating. I could feel my heart still racing, my mind replaying the image of that man with his impossible grin. None of us knew what to say, but I could tell everyone was thinking the same thing. What the hell was that? Chris finally broke the silence, his voice shaky. I swear, I saw something in his eyes, like he knew us, or he knew something about us. "No," Jeff said, his voice low. "That guy was insane. We're just freaked out because we've been on the road too long. Let's find somewhere to stay and we'll be fine." But it wasn't fine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The world outside the car felt off, too still. The trees were too dark, and the road stretched on like it had no end. We were in the middle of nowhere. No signs of life, no buildings, no lights in the distance. Just an endless expanse of woods and nothingness. "We should turn around," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't even know if I was talking to them or just to myself. "This doesn't feel right. Let's go back the way we came." Chris shot me a look. "We're not turning around. We'll keep going. It's just a weird moment." But even he didn't sound convincing. His eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, like he was expecting something to appear out of the darkness. Minutes passed, maybe more. I don't know how long, but it felt like hours. The car headlights barely cut through the blackness ahead. Then, I saw it. A flicker of movement in the trees by the side of the road. "Did anyone else see that?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. "What?" Jeff said, his voice still tense but trying to sound dismissive. "You're imagining things." "No," I insisted. "There was something out there. Something moving." Chris slowed the car and we all looked out the windows. The forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows of the trees thick and suffocating. Then it happened again. A figure, fast, darting between the trees. Just a blur of motion, but it was there. And it was getting closer. "What the hell?" Emily breathed. Suddenly, I heard something else. Faint at first, but unmistakable. A tapping. It was coming from the back of the car. I froze. Everyone went still. "Is someone messing with us?" Jeff asked, but his voice was trembling now. The tapping continued, getting louder, more insistent. It was like someone was hitting the back window with their fists. Chris slammed on the brakes, and we all jerked forward again. The tapping stopped instantly. The car was now completely stopped in the middle of nowhere. The trees loomed over us like dark sentinels, and the air felt colder. Too cold. We were all shivering, even though the temperature hadn't dropped. "Okay, that's it," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to get out of here. Now." "Agreed," Emily said, her eyes wide with terror. Chris, though, didn't move. He was staring straight ahead, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. His hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from losing his mind. Then he whispered, "There's someone standing in front of the car." We all froze. Slowly, hesitantly, we looked forward. There, just outside the reach of the headlights, was another figure. A woman standing unnaturally still. Her long, dark hair hung over her face, obscuring her features. She was dressed in a dirty, torn dress that looked like it had been abandoned for years. We couldn't see her face, but somehow, I knew she was watching us, staring at us. "I can't," Chris's voice cracked. "I can't move the car." I don't know how long we sat there, staring at the woman in front of us, but it felt like an eternity. The air was thick, suffocating. The silence, unbearable. Then suddenly the woman's head snapped up. Her face was wrong. Her eyes were wide open, but they weren't human. They were black, all black, and her mouth was stretched too wide, just like the man from earlier, but worse, like something was going to crawl out of her skin. Without warning, she stepped forward. "Go!" I screamed. "Now!" Chris slammed the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward, barreling past the woman as we heard the sound of something scraping along the roof of the car. The whole vehicle shuddered with the impact. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. But we all felt it. The weight of her eyes on us, her smile, and the unsettling certainty that whatever had been following us was not going to let us go. And in that moment we realized we were no longer on the road we started on. We had crossed into something else, something that didn't want us to leave. We drove for what felt like hours, but the landscape outside didn't change. The trees on either side were too dark, too dense, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly into the unknown. No signs, no markers, no direction. I couldn't even tell which way we were heading anymore. My mind was racing, and the panic in my chest had only grown since we saw that woman. Chris was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Emily was curled into the corner of her seat, her eyes wide and haunted. Jeff, usually the most level-headed of us, sat staring out the window, his mouth moving as if he were trying to say something but couldn't. I kept glancing nervously at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following us. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, lurking in the darkness, watching us. That's when I saw it. A figure standing motionless in the distance, just barely visible in the dim light. "Chris," I said, my voice low and trembling. "Look." He turned his head, his eyes locking on the figure. It wasn't the woman from earlier. This was a man standing in the middle of the road, just like the first one. He was tall, thin, and his arms hung unnaturally long by his sides. His face was obscured by shadow, but I could feel his gaze on us. Cold, unblinking. "Just keep driving," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But even I could tell it was no use. Something in me knew that this wasn't just another person. This was something else. Something that shouldn't be here. Chris's foot hovered over the gas pedal, but he couldn't make himself move. It was as if some force was holding us in place. The world outside was eerily still. No wind, no sound, just that figure staring at us. Then, out of nowhere, the figure took a step forward, and that's when it happened. The car's engine sputtered. It stopped. Completely. "What the hell?" Jeff shouted, his voice rising in panic. I tried to turn to Chris. Start it. Start it." But Chris was already trying, desperately twisting the key, but nothing. The engine was dead, completely unresponsive. And that's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl from somewhere beyond the trees, just out of sight. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a human. It was something else. Something that made my blood run cold. "We're not alone," Emily whispered, her voice shaky. "We need to get out of here now." But we couldn't move. The car was stuck. And the figure in the road, it wasn't stopping. It was walking toward us now, slow but deliberate. Each step seemed to echo in the heavy silence around us. Panic hit me like a tidal wave. I grabbed the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. We were locked in, trapped. "Chris, unlock the door. We need to get out of here," I yelled. My voice panicked. Chris's face was pale, his hands shaking. "I can't. The doors are locked." I don't know why. The figure was closer now. I could see his face, or at least I thought I could. It was a blur of shadows, but I felt his eyes boring into mine. There was no expression, no emotion, just emptiness. He was coming closer and closer, his pace steady, relentless. The growl in the distance grew louder, closer, and whatever was out there, it was drawing nearer. "Emily, try the window," Jeff screamed, but it was too late. The figure reached the car. It was right in front of us now, its long, thin hands resting on the hood, the fingers curling slightly as if it were inspecting us. I could feel the weight of its presence pressing against the car, suffocating the air. And then, it smiled, but not like a human smile. No, this was worse. It was a grin, sharp and wide, like its face was stretching to fit it. And the sound that came next, I'll never forget it. It wasn't a laugh. It wasn't a sound of joy. It was a noise of pure, twisted malice. A screech, high-pitched and jagged, like something being ripped apart. Suddenly, the growl from the woods intensified, and I realized with a sickening feeling that whatever it wasn't alone. We all looked around, our eyes wide with terror, trying to make sense of what was happening. But all I could think was that we needed to get away. We needed to run. The air was thick now, suffocating. I could feel my chest tightening with every passing second. "Get out!" I screamed, pounding on the window, trying to break free. But there was no escape. And then the figure turned. It didn't walk away. It just vanished into thin air. Gone. As if it had never been there at all. I didn't know whether to breathe a sigh of relief or scream. But before we could even process what had just happened, the car jolted. The engine roared back to life on its own, as if something had just forced it to restart. The car lurched forward. "Go!" Jeff shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "Drive, Chris. Drive now." Chris didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his foot on the gas, and the car shot forward, swerving around the figure and down the road. But as we drove, I caught one last glimpse of something moving in the trees. It wasn't a person. It wasn't human. It was something far worse. We drove like we were being chased by the very darkness itself. The engine roared to life, but it didn't feel like our car anymore. It felt like it was being pulled forward, dragged by some unseen force. The road stretched ahead, but no matter how fast we went, the trees seemed to close in tighter, like they were swallowing us whole. I couldn't see a thing except for the flickering headlights and the shadows dancing in the periphery. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. The silence in the car was oppressive, suffocating. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something. Someone, behind us, following us. But there was nothing. Just the road, the trees, the endless night. And then, it happened again. A sound soft at first, like the rustle of leaves. But then it grew louder, like something moving quickly through the brush. Someone or something was out there. I felt it. I could hear it. And this time it was close. So close. I turned my head, my heart pounding in my chest, and I saw it. A shape, dark and shifting, moving just beyond the edge of the trees, keeping pace with us. I couldn't make out details, but I knew. I knew it was there. "Chris," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Do you see that?" Chris didn't answer. He didn't even look. He was too focused on the road, his hands gripped tightly to the wheel, his knuckles still white. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was feeling it too. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw another figure. A flash of movement, just ahead, darting between the trees. A man? A woman? Couldn't tell. But it was there, watching. "It's following us." Jeff's voice was low, terrified. "We need to get out of here." But where? The road kept winding, no end in sight, and the further we went, the more I felt like we were trapped in a loop. It didn't matter how fast we drove. The figures never stopped appearing. They kept emerging from the trees, each one darker, more twisted than the last, like something was pulling them from the depths of the woods. It felt like the forest itself was alive, like it was hungry. I was about to speak up, to suggest we stop and try to get out, when suddenly the car jerked. It was like something had slammed into us from the side. "What the hell?" Chris shouted, fighting to keep control of the wheel as the car swerved violently. I turned to look out the side window, and that's when I saw it. A face, a pale, twisted face, pressed right against the glass. I could see the features. Sunken eyes, mouth agape, teeth sharp and jagged, grinning at us like it was enjoying our fear. Its skin was so white, it almost glowed in the dark, and its hands, its long, gnarled fingers were scratching at the window, desperate to get in. I screamed, "Get away from us!" I screamed, but the thing didn't move. It stayed there, staring through the glass, its grin widening. Chris swerved again, slamming the car into the gravel. We bounced across the road, the tires skidding and screeching. But the thing on the window, it was still there, still grinning. "Chris, we need to stop. We need to stop," Emily screamed, her voice hoarse with terror. But it was clear. We weren't in control anymore. We finally regained control, and the car lurched back onto the road. But the creature? It was gone. Or at least I thought it was. But as we sped forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was with us. Suddenly, the car's lights flickered. Once, twice, and then the road ahead disappeared. The headlights hit a thick, impenetrable blackness. It was like driving into a void. Where the hell did the road go? Chris gasped, his voice trembling. And then it happened. The car stopped again, like it was being forced to stop. But this time, it wasn't the engine. No, this time the car was being pulled. I looked to the side, and my breath caught in my throat. The trees were moving. No, not moving. They were closing in, leaning toward us, their branches stretching long like fingers reaching out. They weren't just part of the forest anymore. They were part of something else. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I looked out the back window, and I swear, I saw those figures again. They were no longer in the distance. They were right there, almost within reach, standing just outside the car, their eyes glowing, those twisted smiles still etched on their faces. We were surrounded. I grabbed at the door handle again. Desperation clawed at me. We need to get out now. This isn't normal. We can't just... But my words died in my throat. The trees. They were moving toward us, their branches now bending at impossible angles, like they were alive, like they were going to swallow us whole. And that's when I heard it. A voice. Low. Grating. Almost a whisper. It was coming from the darkness around us. Leave. Now. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything that belonged in this world. It was a sound I couldn't explain. A growl. A hiss. A voice that wasn't meant for human ears. And that's when I realized it. The road. It wasn't leading us out. It was pulling us deeper into whatever this place was. I could feel the walls closing in. I could hear the sound of something scraping across the car, trying to get inside. And then, everything went silent. For a moment, the world held its breath. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a road trip. We weren't just lost. We were never meant to leave. The silence was worse than the growls, worse than the tapping, worse than the figures that haunted the edges of our vision. It was a silence that pressed in on us, heavy and suffocating, as if the world itself had paused, waiting. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My heart was hammering in my chest, and every instinct in me screamed to run, but the car felt like it was glued to the spot, trapped in the grip of something far darker than anything we'd ever encountered. Chris sat frozen at the wheel, his eyes wide, scanning the shadows around us. Emily was holding onto the seat, her knuckles white, tears streaming down her face. Jeff, too, was staring out of the window, but his expression had turned blank. I could see it in his eyes, the hopelessness, the terror that we might not get out of this. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, I saw it. In the distance, through the trees, there was a light. A faint, flickering glow, barely visible, but there nonetheless. It was too far off to make out what it was, but in that moment, it felt like a beacon. The first sign of something real, something human. Do you see that? I whispered, barely daring to speak. Jeff turned to look, his expression a mix of fear and hope. A light, he murmured. It's something. Should we go towards it? Emily's voice was fragile, but there was a desperation there too. I nodded, even though every part of me screamed to turn around, to get out of the car and run. But we had no choice. It was the only option. Chris's hand shook as he shifted the car into gear. We moved slowly at first, creeping forward, trying to make out the light, but as we neared it, something else became apparent. It wasn't a building. It wasn't a town. It was a clearing, a small patch of open ground, surrounded by trees, where the light seemed to come from nowhere. A soft, pale glow that illuminated the area like a ghostly halo. We stopped at the edge of the clearing, the car's headlights cutting through the shadows, revealing nothing but empty space. Is that it? Jeff asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. I couldn't answer. The air around us had changed, felt heavier, colder, like something was watching us. I glanced back through the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. Something was moving in the trees, figure tall, looming. It wasn't one of the creatures we'd seen before. This one was different. It had no face, just a dark, empty space where a face should be. And it was slowly moving toward us, its long limbs moving unnaturally, jerking and twitching like a marionette controlled by invisible strings. Before I could say anything, a shrill, bone-chilling screech tore through the air. My blood froze. The sound was almost human, but not quite, like a person screaming, but distorted, broken. It came from the clearing, but there was nothing there. Nothing but shadows and the faint glow. The figure in the trees moved faster now, closer, its long arms stretching toward the car. Its body was now surrounded by tendrils of black smoke that swirled around it like a cloak. It was too fast, too wrong. We need to go, I shouted, my voice rising in panic. Chris slammed the gas pedal, and the car shot forward, but the clearing, it wasn't empty anymore. It was as if the ground itself had risen, a thick, black mist curling from the earth, wrapping itself around the tires. "No, no," Chris screamed, the car jerking violently as if trying to break free from the grip of something unseen. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything shifted. The road, the trees, the car, it all vanished. We were no longer on the road. We were somewhere else. The trees had disappeared. The clearing was gone. The headlights flickered out, leaving us in complete darkness. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and frantic, but there was no sound around us. No sign of life, only the suffocating silence that seemed to stretch on forever. And then, a whisper. It was so faint at first, I thought I imagined it. "Leave, before it's too late." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I had ever heard before. It felt like it was inside my head, like it was whispering directly to my soul. The car's headlights flickered back on, and I gasped in horror. We were surrounded. Figures, dozens of them, standing in a perfect circle around the car. Their faces were featureless, their eyes hollow, their mouths wide open as if they were waiting to scream. But no sound came. They just stared, their dark, empty eyes locked onto us, unmoving. The air was thick with the smell of decay, like something long dead. The trees, the forest, everything was wrong. And yet, we were trapped in the center of it, unable to move, unable to escape. "Please, just let us go," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. But the figures didn't move. They didn't speak. And then the ground trembled, slowly at first, but growing stronger, until the car was shaking violently. The sky above us turned a deep, unnatural black, and the air grew colder. So cold. "Chris," I screamed, "do something." But Chris wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. I turned to look. He was gone. And in his place, one of the figures. It was wearing his face. No, it wasn't his face. It was wrong. His eyes were wide open, but there was nothing behind them, just black voids. His mouth stretched unnaturally wide, and the smile was the same one we had seen before. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I was suffocating. The car shook harder, and the figures closed in around us, their movements jerky and wrong, as if they were drawn by invisible strings. And that's when I understood. There was no road. There was no escape. We had crossed over into their world, and we were never meant to leave. I felt the chill of something cold, creeping, like fingers brushing against my skin. I couldn't move. The air felt like it was closing in on me, pressing down, suffocating me. I turned to Emily, my voice barely a whisper. "What do we do? What do we do?" Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror, but there was nothing in her expression but helplessness. "I don't know," she said, shaking. "I don't know how to get out of here." The figures, those twisted, featureless beings, were slowly stepping forward, their movements jerking and unnatural, their hands outstretched. They were closing in on us. No one spoke. No one dared move. As the air grew colder still, the blackness around us more suffocating. I glanced around the car, feeling my pulse race. My mind was screaming at me to find some way out, some escape, but there was no escape. Not from this, not from whatever we had stumbled into. Then that same voice returned, the one we'd heard earlier, the whispering voice that chilled my blood. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was inside my head, loud and clear, as if it was speaking directly to me. "Leave, while you still can." I jerked back, my breath catching in my throat. But the voice didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent. "Leave. Leave now before it's too late. Before you become part of them." I could feel the weight of those words pressing against my chest. I didn't know who or what was speaking, but I knew one thing for certain. We had to leave. We had to do something. I turned to Emily, her face pale in the dim light. "Do you hear that? The voice?" She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes, I think it's telling us to leave. But where can we go?" The figures were closer now. Their presence felt like a suffocating weight, a tangible force pressing down on us. like we were standing on the edge of some abyss. But through the crushing fear, something inside me sparked. A strange sense of urgency, an overwhelming need to move, to escape whatever dark force had trapped us here. I slammed my hands on the steering wheel, the sound echoing through the car. "Chris!" I yelled, my voice hoarse. "Where the hell are you?" There was no answer, no sign of Chris, only the twisted version of him in the driver's seat, smiling that impossible smile. I knew we had to do something, but I didn't know what. The figures were just outside the windows now, their hands pressed to the glass. Their eyes, those empty black eyes, were staring at us with an unblinking intensity that made my skin crawl. I could feel their gaze, crawling under my skin, reaching into my soul. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Please let us go. Please." And then, suddenly, the car jerked. It was a violent lurch that knocked us all forward in our seats, and the air around us felt electric. A crackling, strange energy surged through the car, making my hair stand on end. The figures stopped moving. They froze in place, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. It was like time had stopped. But then, slowly, like the slow awakening of some ancient, forgotten thing, the car moved. The engine roared to life, and the headlights flickered on again, brighter than before, cutting through the suffocating darkness. But the figures didn't retreat. No, they didn't move at all. "Drive!" I screamed. "Now!" Chris, the thing that was pretending to be Chris, didn't hesitate. It wasn't Chris anymore, not really. It was something that had taken over, something that had replaced him. But it drove. The car shot forward, the wheels squealing on the gravel road as the headlights illuminated the night. The figures didn't follow us. They just stood there, staring, unmoving as we sped away. We didn't speak for a long time. We couldn't. We were all too shaken, too terrified to speak. The world outside the windows seemed to blur, and the car felt like it was tearing through a void. Not a road, but some kind of dark, unearthly space. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the car slowed. The road had changed. The trees had parted, and we were driving on a different stretch now. A stretch of road that looked almost normal. Almost like we were back in the world we knew. But I knew. Deep down, I knew that we were not the same. The figures, the whispers, the darkness, it had marked us. It had left its mark, and we would never be free of it. Chris, the thing that was Chris, finally spoke. We need to keep going," he said, his voice hollow and empty, like someone reading a script. "There's no going back." The weight of those words sank into my chest, and I knew then, with an awful certainty, that the road we had been on, this road trip, wasn't just a trip anymore. We were never supposed to leave. We were never supposed to find the way out. We had crossed over, and there was no turning back. As we continued down that road, the air grew thicker. The sky darkened once again, the stars obscured by something unnatural, and in the distance, I could swear I saw more figures, more shadows, waiting for us. We were being hunted, but we couldn't stop. We had no choice but to keep going. And I knew deep down that we were never going to reach the end of the road. We continued to drive, but I had lost all sense of time. The road stretched ahead, twisting and turning like a dark serpent, winding through trees that now seemed more like looming sentinels, their branches reaching out to grasp us, pull us into the depths of whatever nightmare we had stumbled into. Chris, the thing in Chris's body, kept his hands firmly on the wheel, but I could see the emptiness in his eyes. He wasn't Chris anymore. Not really. He was something else, something that had taken over, wearing his face like a mask. He hadn't spoken since the car had started moving again, and none of us dared to address him. There was nothing human left in him. Emily sat next to me, her hands shaking, her face pale. Jeff was silent on the other side of the car, his eyes darting nervously from the window to the rearview mirror. I could feel it, too. The weight of unseen eyes watching us, following us through the darkness. And the whispers were growing louder. The voice that had warned us earlier now echoed constantly in my mind. A low hum that I couldn't escape. Leave while you still can. But where could we go? The road had become an unending loop. There was no end in sight. The world outside the car seemed to stretch on forever, a twisted, empty expanse that no longer made any sense. We had crossed into some other realm, some dark place where the rules didn't apply. And as the whispers continued, another sound joined in, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the back of the car. I turned, but saw nothing, just the empty road behind us, stretching into the inky blackness. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. My throat felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Emily nodded, her eyes wide with terror. "Yes. It's coming from behind us." "Don't look," Jeff muttered. But there was a tremor in his voice. "Don't look. Just keep driving. Whatever you do, don't turn around." But I couldn't help it. My eyes were drawn to the rearview mirror, against my will. And that's when I saw it. A face. A pale, twisted face pressed against the back window. Its features warped, stretching in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Its eyes, if you could even call them eyes, were hollow, black pits, and its mouth was stretched wide in a grotesque, inhuman grin. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is that?" I screamed, but the face didn't move. It just stayed there, staring at us, that horrifying grin never fading. And the tapping continued, now louder, more frantic, like something was desperately trying to break into the car. Emily recoiled, her hands covering her face as if she could block out the nightmare before us. Jeff squeezed his eyes shut, whispering prayers under his breath. But I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop myself from staring at the thing outside the window, its face pressed against the glass like it was trying to get in. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the face vanished. Just disappeared, like it had never been there at all. But the tapping remained. It was no longer just from the back window. It was coming from all around us, from the car's roof, the sides, the floor. They were on us. I felt my breath catch in my throat, and I turned to Emily, panic rising in my chest. "We're trapped. We're trapped." She could barely look at me. She just shook her head, tears streaking down her face. We can't escape this. Whatever this is, it's too late." And that's when I saw it. In the distance, the figure standing alone in the middle of the road, just like before. But this time it wasn't just one. There were dozens of them, lining the road. Their faces were the same, dark, hollow, their eyes empty, their mouths wide open in silent screams. They didn't move, not at first. They just stood there, waiting, watching us approach. I felt my stomach churn with dread. The road had narrowed, and the figures were now blocking our path. They weren't going to let us pass. Chris, or whatever he was now, didn't slow down. He kept driving straight into them, as if he didn't see them at all. But I could feel the tension rising in the air, the oppressive weight of the darkness, the feeling that whatever had taken Chris was now driving us towards something inevitable. We were getting closer. I reached out to grab Emily's hand, trying to reassure myself that we weren't alone. "We need to stop. We can't keep going like this." But she didn't respond. She was staring out the window, her eyes wide with terror. And then, just before we collided with the figures ahead, they disappeared. Like smoke, they vanished into the air, leaving only the empty road in front of us. But there was something else, something worse, a sound, a low, growling hum that filled the car and rattled my bones. It wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't coming from the figures. It was coming from within the car. Something was inside with us. It was then I realized. We weren't being hunted by the figures. We had become the prey. A shadow moved across the dashboard, darkening the interior of the car. A dark mass, swirling, shapeless, but tangible. It was like it was watching us, pressing against us, waiting. And I knew. We had crossed too far. We had gone too deep into this nightmare. There was no way out. The road had no end. The figures were waiting for us to break, to let go. And then, they would take us. We were already lost. And whatever was out there, whatever dark force had claimed us, it was just getting started. I turned to the others, my voice trembling. Whatever happens, don't look back. But I knew. Deep down, we had already passed the point of no return. There was no going back now. There was only the road. And the darkness waiting ahead. The hum inside the car grew louder, vibrating through the seats and my bones. It wasn't a sound. Not exactly. It felt more like a pressure, a weight pushing down on us from all sides, like something was suffocating the air around us. The darkness inside the car had deepened, and I could barely see Emily and Jeff's faces in the dim light, just their silhouettes, frozen in terror. Chris, or what had once been Chris, was still driving, his hands on the wheel, his expression vacant. There was no emotion behind his eyes, just emptiness. His lips were slightly parted, as though he was waiting for something to happen. But what was he waiting for? I was too terrified to look away, too gripped by the realization that whatever had happened to Chris, whatever force had taken over him, was taking its time. It was savoring us. It was making us wait, making us stew in the terror before it finally tore us apart. I reached for Emily's hand again, my grip tight as I tried to anchor myself, trying to reassure her that we weren't completely alone. But even the touch of her trembling fingers only deepened the dread. The tapping had stopped. For a moment, everything was still. But it wasn't a calm stillness. It was a dead, suffocating stillness, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting. Then, without warning, the headlights flickered, twice, and then the car screeched to a halt. I had no idea why. I couldn't understand what had just happened. The road, smooth, empty, had suddenly turned to nothing. It was as if the earth itself had fallen away, and we were suspended in midair. The wheels stopped turning. The car was no longer moving, but it was still on the road, still in the world. The darkness outside the car deepened, the shadows closing in like a curtain. The trees that had once surrounded us, those twisted, gnarled shapes, were gone. In their place, nothing, a void, just endless blackness, stretching in every direction. We were no longer in the world we had known. We had crossed into something other, something that shouldn't exist. I could feel it now, pressing against the car, pressing against my chest. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. "Chris," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What's happening? What is this?" There was no response from him. The figure in the driver's seat didn't even acknowledge me. He just stared ahead, his eyes empty, his face blank. I turned to Emily. "We have to get out. We need to leave now." She didn't say anything, but I could see it in her eyes. The realization had set in. This wasn't just some twisted detour. This was a trap. We weren't supposed to be here. We were never supposed to leave. The air outside grew colder, and I could feel the weight of something pressing down on the car. The whispers started again, faint at first, then louder, louder and louder, until they filled every corner of my mind. "You shouldn't have come." The voice was soft, but it wasn't just one voice. It was a chorus, 1,000 whispers that seemed to be coming from every direction, from inside the car, from the trees, from the empty space around us. "You can't leave." The voice was now inside my head, no longer just a whisper, but a command, a warning. It wasn't just telling me what I couldn't do. It was telling me what was going to happen. Emily's breath was ragged. "Please, make it stop." But the voice didn't stop. It only grew louder. "The road is yours now." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. My mind screamed for escape, but my body wouldn't move. The doors wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't budge. And then, through the blackness, I saw it. A shape towering over us in the distance. A figure. At first, it was indistinct, just a shadow in the void. But as it came closer, the shape solidified. It was huge. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. A massive, hulking presence, towering above us. Its body was long and twisted, like a sickening hybrid of human and beast. Its limbs were bent in unnatural angles, but they moved with a purpose, dragging its form forward with terrifying speed. Couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The thing was coming closer, and we were trapped. We couldn't move. We couldn't run. Then the voice again, deep and resonating. You are part of this now. You belong to the road. The figure loomed closer. I saw its face, and it was worse than anything I could have imagined. Its face wasn't a face at all. It was an empty void, like a gaping black hole, sucking in all light, all hope. And from that emptiness, eyes appeared, countless eyes, hundreds of them, filling the void, staring at us, piercing us, burning us with their gaze. I felt a wave of vertigo, like the world was spinning, and I wasn't sure where I was anymore. The air grew heavy, thicker than before. It was suffocating. I felt the cold seeping into my skin, into my bones. And then I heard it, a sound I'll never forget. The scream. It wasn't from Emily. It wasn't from Jeff. It was coming from inside the car. It was Chris. Or rather, the thing in Chris's body. The scream was long, shrill, and full of agony, like the sound of something being torn apart. It echoed in the confined space of the car, reverberating in my skull. And then it stopped abruptly. Chris's body fell limp at the wheel. The darkness outside the car closed in. The whispers became a roar. And then the figure reached the car. I realized too late. The road had never been a way out. The road was the trap. And we were the bait. The end was here, and there was nowhere left to run. The car trembled under the weight of the presence that surrounded it. The figure, the thing, loomed above us, casting an impossibly long shadow that stretched across the ground and reached into the car. It was as though the very fabric of reality had been torn open, and whatever nightmare had taken shape in the void had now taken hold of us. Chris's body, his shell really, was lifeless at the wheel, his eyes vacant, staring straight ahead. Emily, Jeff, and I were frozen in place, barely daring to breathe, too terrified to even look at one another. The car was silent, save for the growing hum, the oppressive vibration that filled the air, as though the entire world around us was vibrating to some unholy rhythm. Then the voice came again. The whispers, now no longer whispers but a deep, guttural sound, filled my mind, crawling over my thoughts like 100 cold hands. You've come too far to turn back now. The words seemed to come from everywhere, from within the very core of the car, from the dark figure outside, from the earth beneath us. They weren't just spoken aloud. They were embedded in my skull, twisting around in my brain. I felt the weight of them, pulling at me, trying to drag me into whatever horrible place this was. The thing outside began to move, slow at first, but with growing speed, its arms stretching unnaturally long, its fingers reaching toward the car. I could hear the sound of bone cracking, stretching, like the very essence of its body was defying nature itself. And with every step it took, the darkness grew, pressing in on us, swallowing the space inside the car. It was too much. The car felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. The air grew colder, biting, as if the very temperature of the world had been stolen. I could feel the cold seeping into my skin, freezing me from the inside out. You don't belong here. The voice was louder now, sharper, and I could feel its power suffusing the car, pushing against us. I could feel it pulling at my thoughts, at my very essence. I wanted to scream, to beg, to somehow make it stop, but I was paralyzed. None of us could move. The thing was here. The road was here. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The tapping, the relentless tapping that had been echoing all around us, stilled. The car was silent again, the world holding its breath, as if it too was waiting. Waiting for something to happen. Waiting for us to choose. I turned to Emily, her face pale, eyes wide with terror, and whispered, "What do we do? How do we get out of this?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze was locked on the figure, watching it, but I could see the realization in her eyes. The same hollow look I had seen in the mirror every time I dared look at myself. We were trapped. No escape. No way out. But then, as if summoned by our collective fear, the voice came again. You must choose. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. My breath caught in my throat, my hands gripping the seat, as the words echoed through the car. I could hear them in my head, in my heart, pressing in on me. The thing outside, it was waiting for our decision. I turned to Jeff. What does it want? What choice? He shook his head, tears filling his eyes. I don't know. I don't know what it wants. And then it hit me, the terrible, suffocating realization. The road, the figures, Chris, the endless darkness. It wasn't just a prison. It wasn't just a trap. It was a game. And we were the pieces. We were part of the road now. Part of whatever this was. And the only way to get out was to give something up. I felt my stomach churn. What does it want us to give? I whispered, my voice hoarse with dread. The tapping started again. Louder. Faster. The presence outside the car was pressing in, the air growing so dense I could barely breathe. The road beneath us seemed to vibrate, like the ground was shifting, realigning itself. And then, the monster, spoke, its voice seeping into the car like thick smoke. One must stay. One must give themselves to the road. To take what you want, one must pay the price. I froze. One must stay? The realization hit me like a slap to the face. One of us had to stay. One of us had to be left behind to feed whatever dark force had taken over this place. I turned to Emily. She was looking at me, her eyes wide, pleading. But there was something else there too. Something I couldn't describe. Like she had already made a decision. We can't, I whispered, choking on the words. We can't choose who stays. We can't just leave one of us behind. But the thing didn't care. It was giving us a choice, but it wasn't a choice at all. It was a cruel trick. A demand. The car lurched forward. A sudden jolt that slammed me back against my seat. I looked outside, the road was gone. There was nothing but an endless abyss in every direction. The figure was moving toward the car again, its massive form growing closer. Its eyes, those countless eyes, were fixed on us. It was waiting for us to decide. Emily's hand reached out toward mine. I can't be the one who stays. Her voice trembled, and I could hear the raw fear, the helplessness in her words. But the truth was there, hanging in the air like an unspoken command. One of us had to stay, and the thing outside would take whoever we chose. It was no longer a matter of what we wanted. It was a matter of survival. And deep down, I knew one of us wasn't going to make it out of here. The choice was made. The road would claim its prize. The silence that filled the car was suffocating. My heart thudded in my chest, too loud, too fast. I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me, heavier than the dark, thick air outside the car. The road had become something else, something I couldn't understand, something that couldn't be escaped. The figure outside was closer now, its towering presence filling the world with its dark, suffocating power. Its eyes were still there, watching, endless, the void within them sucking everything around it. I turned to Emily and Jeff, our faces all pale, eyes wide, filled with the same dread. The voice that had haunted us now echoed louder in my head. One must stay. One must give themselves to the road. There was no avoiding it. The road wouldn't let us go. Whatever this thing was, it had already decided. The game was over. It was our turn to pay the price. My body trembled as the horrible truth sank in. One of us had to stay behind. Jeff's voice broke through the stillness, raw and desperate. No, no one is staying behind. We can't let it have anyone else. But the reality was clear. The thing outside was not going to leave us alone until it got what it wanted. Until it took one of us. Emily started, her voice shaking, but she stopped herself. I could see the tears pooling in her eyes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. I can't be the one to stay, she whispered, her hands trembling as she gripped the seat. And in that moment I knew. It had to be me. I'll stay, I said. My voice barely a whisper, but it was firm. It was the only choice I had left. The only way to end it. The only way for them to get away. No, Jeff breathed, his face going white. No, you can't. But I was already unbuckling my seatbelt, already standing up. The thing outside, the horrible, twisted figure, was waiting. I could feel it. It was calling to me, pulling me into the dark, into the endless nothingness that had swallowed the road. It wasn't my choice anymore. It was the road's choice. "I'm sorry," I whispered, looking at them. My eyes filled with an emotion I could barely comprehend. "I'm sorry, but it's the only way. You have to leave. You have to go." I could see their faces. Emily's, Jeff's, frozen in shock, in disbelief. But they didn't argue. They didn't fight me. It was already decided. The thing outside had already claimed its prize. I opened the door. The cold air rushed in, biting at my skin, but I didn't feel it. I was numb. Numb to the world, to the horror that had been unfolding before us. The thing was waiting for me, its long, twisted arms outstretched, its black eyes fixed on mine, its mouth widening in an impossible grin. I could hear the sound of its bones cracking and shifting as it moved closer. It was real. It was here. And I knew. I knew that I was never meant to leave, that the moment we took that wrong turn, we sealed our fate. We were never supposed to make it out. I took one last look at Emily and Jeff, their faces a blur of fear and sadness, and then I stepped out of the car. The door slammed shut behind me, but I didn't hear it. I was already gone. The darkness swallowed me whole, consumed everything, my mind, my body, my soul. I didn't feel the cold anymore. I didn't feel anything. I just existed in the void. The figure was gone. The road was gone. Everything was gone. And then I heard it, the whisper again. One must stay. I didn't fight it. I didn't have the strength anymore. The thing had taken me, but there was something else. I had become part of it. The road, the darkness, the void. I wasn't alone. The last thing I remembered before the endless black took over was a fading voice. A voice that wasn't mine. It was them. "We're sorry. We'll never forget you." And then, there was only the road. Endless. Unyielding. And it would never let go. The end had come. And we had crossed it. Forever.